Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Hey parents, if you're watching this video, then your son or daughter is in one of my science classes. I am Mr. Bergmann. This is going to be a weird school year. We're starting out with a hybrid mode and, pandemic land. This is a crazy time for education. It's kind of, 2020, the year that we just didn't know was coming, right? But the Lord knew, and the Lord has this. And I'm confident that what we're going to do at HC is going to be very valuable for your students. So anyway, a couple of thoughts about me. You're probably like, who's this guy, right? Quick background, I taught for 24 years in Colorado. And then for 2 years, I was director of technology for a school district in the Chicago area. And then for 6 or 7 years, I actually traveled around the world. I wrote some books about education, and I had an opportunity to travel lots of places and work with teachers in schools, ministers of education. It was a great opportunity. But all throughout that time as I was doing consulting, I really felt the tug. I think I felt the Lord speaking me to get back in the classroom and practice what I've been preaching. So that's really briefly about me, but I want to talk about how things might look a little different, both with pandemic land, but also with the way that I teach. I believe, first of all, two things about education. Number one, that good education always starts with this word: relationships. Yes, your son or daughter really won't care what I teach until they know that I care about them. And I believe that it matters that we build relationships. And this is part of the gospel, isn't it? The meta-narrative of the Bible, of course, is that God is calling us back into relationship with Him. And that's just part that's built into us as human beings, right? The second thing I believe that makes good education good is that it needs to be active. Or fancy term is it needs to be active learning, all right? That passive learning doesn't work. There has to be some sort of active component in that. And I've adopted a particular model. Let's talk about how class is going to look a lot different for your son or daughter. Is we're going to do a mastery learning model, mastery. Ultimately, the idea of mastery has been around a long time. When you took your driving test, you had to master it before they let you get your license, right? Or your son or daughter maybe is getting their license this year. That's kind of scary, isn't it? So it's a mastery learning approach. And the idea is that when the student gets to the end of a chapter or unit or some kind of a study, they take some sort of a assessment. The assessment, I'm saying they have to actually get 80% until they pass it. One thing that the students tend to like, the idea is that they have to get 80%. So if they get 62, I make them take it over. But no penalty if you pass later. I have a fundamental philosophy that I don't care how fast students learn it, I care that they learn it. And this is my second year, and frankly, all the kids were successful last year. I'm sure they will be successful this year. There's some tips, and I've made some tips for your sons and your daughters to look at on how to be successful, in fact, somewhat from the perspective of the students from last year. So that's the big idea of mastery learning, is that they get to the end. They're going to work somewhat at their own pace. That's not exactly true. They're going to have to work at a pace, and particularly in the pandemic world, we're going to have to do things a little bit more lockstep than we normally would because we have such limited time. See, because I always ask this one question. Well, this is the question. This is the key question that I've asked for years. What's the best use of class time? And I'm going to argue it's not me standing up and yakking at your students, it's them doing active learning stuff and actually also connecting with each other and connecting with me. This is the question. And so one key component to make mastery actually work is the students are going to have to take some ownership, and they're going to have to do some pre-learning activities. And in the pre-learning, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to watch a short video or do some kind of a reading. And it's an interactive system that we're going to use. The tech isn't that important probably for your perspective, but they're going to watch a video, and as they watch that video, they're going to make some comments on it, and they're going to get some introduction to the topic. Now, hear me carefully. I'm not expecting them to master the content from watching the content or reading this, but they do get exposed to it, and then when they come to class, then I'm going to help them sort of fill in the gaps. So I'm not expecting the students to teach themselves. I sort of am, but that's the best way to learn, is they're going to teach themselves to a point, and then I'm going to help them put in the gaps. Because getting introduced to content, I like to call that the easy stuff. But the hard stuff is when they need my help. I'm teaching chemistry, physics, and GMO, and in those courses, especially chemistry and physics, they often can be very difficult for students, and they need additional help, and I'm going to be there in class to help them. Speaking of class, because of the pandemic, this question becomes even more important, doesn't it? What's the best use of class time? I'm going to have very limited class time with your students, but I have a system in place to even help your students with the hard stuff when they're working independently. I'm looking forward to being your son or your daughter's teacher. If you're at all interested, you may want to take a quick gander. I did a TED Talk. It kind of gives you outlines, kind of some of my ideas about education and what it ought to look like, and you can see the title, How to End Educational Malpractice. You can just Google it, you'll find it. Again, I'm so excited to be your son or your daughter's science teacher this year. As much as this is going to probably be an odd and a weird year, I think it's going to be a great year too. I've been thinking about our students and the ones I had last year, and of course the ones who I'll see just in the next few days. This generation is going to change the world, and I think they're growing up in this strange, weird pandemic world, but I think it's making them stronger and more resilient. I really saw that happen with our students last spring. They became much more sort of self-actual, I don't know what the word is, they did stuff on their own, and they realized that they had to do things on their own, so they weren't just being spoon-fed, and they realized they didn't have to be spoon-fed. There's a word that's just escaping me. Someone will probably figure out what it is. But hey, I'm again looking forward to being your kid's science teacher, and I hope to see you around. Feel free to send me an email at this email address, and I'm glad to just pick up the phone and chat. See ya.